A normal day at work can turn into a nightmare in an instant. Some jobs come with risks, but even the safest workplaces have seen horrifying tragedies. In this video, we'll uncover 5 more of the most disturbing workplace deaths, real stories of workers who never made it home. It was June 22, 2019, in Iloilo City, Philippines. Jomar Junko, an 18-year-old factory worker, had just started his second week at a sausage-making facility. His job was to pack finished products, not operate machinery. But that morning, a tragic accident would cut his life short in a devastating way. Jomar arrived for work at 7 a.m., starting his shift alongside his co-worker, Carl David Carlos. Carl, who had more experience, was in charge of operating the machines, including a large meat mixer used to process chorizo. Jomar was responsible for handling packed goods. However, for reasons unknown, he approached the machine while it was still running. At around 7:30 a.m., Carl briefly stepped away, leaving Jomar alone. What happened next remains unclear. Jomar may have been curious about the machine or trying to retrieve something, but as he reached inside, his right arm got caught in the powerful mechanism, pulling him in. When Carl returned, he was met with a horrific sight. Jomar's legs were sticking out of the mixer. Panicked, he rushed to shut it off, but it had already stopped by then, trapping Jomar inside. Emergency responders arrived around 9 a.m., but rescuing him was difficult. Parts of the machine had to be dismantled before his body could be recovered. Authorities later confirmed that Jomar had not been dismembered but had likely suffocated due to the force of the machine and his trapped position. Jomar had only been at the factory for 2 weeks and was not trained to use the machine. His job was limited to packing products, yet he somehow ended up handling the equipment unsupervised. It's believed that he either attempted to inspect the machine or retrieve something when the accident occurred. Jocelyn Jaleko, the factory owner, expressed his condolences and stated that Jomar had been warned not to operate the machinery. He described Jomar as a hard-working employee, but believed his curiosity led to the incident. This tragedy raised serious concerns about workplace safety and whether proper supervision was in place for young, inexperienced workers. Carl David Carlos later spoke to the media, explaining that the mixer's motor had stopped midway through the accident. He suggested that Jomar may have reached for the blades while the machine was still on. "You cannot reach the switch from here," Carl explained. "It's possible he put his hand near the moving blades." The police investigated the case and found no foul play. Surveillance footage and witness testimonies confirmed Jomar was alone when the accident happened. Since he was not assigned to the machine, his death was ruled an accident. An autopsy was ordered to determine the exact cause, though authorities believed suffocation was the most likely reason. This incident has sparked discussions about factory safety, particularly for workers handling heavy machinery. Cases like Jomar's are not uncommon. Similar accidents have occurred in factories worldwide, often due to lack of training, poor supervision, or failure to enforce safety protocols. Jomar's death left his co-workers and employer devastated. Those who knew him described him as a dedicated young man with a strong work ethic. The factory owner agreed to cover the funeral expenses, and Jomar's family accepted the settlement for burial costs. Despite this, many questions remain. Was the factory's safety training enough? Should young workers have been given better supervision? Could stricter regulations have prevented the accident? Had Jomar stayed away from the machinery, would he still be alive? Could someone have stopped him from approaching it? Was the factory doing enough to ensure inexperienced workers were properly guided? These unanswered questions highlight the risks workers face in industrial settings. Jomar's story is a heartbreaking example of how one moment can lead to irreversible consequences. His case serves as a reminder that safety precautions should never be overlooked, especially in workplaces with dangerous equipment. It was February 20, 2023, at around 2:15 p.m. in Bedford, Ohio, when a massive explosion tore through the Ishuman and Cormer metal manufacturing plant. The blast, which happened at the facility on Alexander Road, left one worker dead and several others injured. For those inside, it was a moment of chaos and devastation they would never forget. Steve Mullins, a 46-year-old maintenance worker, had spent nearly 30 years at the plant. He started working there right after high school and was known for his dedication. That day, he was among 14 employees inside when the explosion struck. The first blast was minor, but the second was catastrophic. The force of the explosion shook the ground and was heard miles away. Nearby businesses felt the impact, with windows shattering and debris flying into parking lots. Thick smoke filled the sky as burning metal and wreckage scattered. Workers from neighboring companies, including Jeff Hunn from Midstate Sales and Matthew Wiggins from Rose-Colored Gaming, described the sound as deafening. Mullins and several others suffered severe burns. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition but did not survive. His passing left a deep impact on his family, friends, and longtime colleagues. The explosion caused molten metal to rain down, making an already dangerous situation worse. Flames spread quickly, consuming large parts of the facility and causing part of the building to collapse. A brick wall was completely blown out, with massive debris crashing onto cars and structures nearby. The Oakwood Fire Department, which responded to the scene, called it one of the largest fires they had ever handled. Emergency crews arrived quickly, with ambulances, medical helicopters, and firefighters from multiple cities rushing in. Witnesses described injured workers walking out in shock, many covered in burns and dust. Oakwood Fire Department Captain Brian DeRocco recalled how most of the injured were able to move on their own, though the trauma they experienced was evident. Investigators believe the explosion was caused by water leaking onto molten metal inside a furnace, creating a powerful steam blast. The plant had a history of safety concerns. In 2019, OSHA inspectors found that employees were exposed to hazardous conditions involving molten metal. One worker had previously suffered severe burns due to a lack of proper protective gear. The company was cited for violations, but necessary changes were not fully implemented. Following the explosion, OSHA launched another investigation. Reports indicated that the company had failed to follow proper safety procedures, increasing the risk of such an incident. A lawsuit has since been filed on behalf of the injured workers, claiming that defective safety measures contributed to the explosion and the extent of the injuries. Steve Mullen's death deeply affected those who knew him. Tributes poured in from family, friends, and co-workers, remembering his dedication and hard work. Losing him was a painful blow to the community, especially those who had worked alongside him for decades. I. Schumann and Company released a statement expressing condolences and acknowledging the impact of the explosion. They promised to cooperate with investigators and support the injured workers and their families. The plant has remained closed since the incident, and the company has assured that affected employees will receive necessary assistance. This tragedy raises serious questions about workplace safety in industrial settings, particularly those dealing with hazardous materials like molten metal. Investigators are still looking into what went wrong and how similar accidents can be prevented. Could this have been avoided if proper safety measures were followed? Would Steve Mullen still be alive today if previous warnings had been taken more seriously? The answers may take time, but for those affected, the events of February 20th, 2023 will never be forgotten. It was November 28, 2022 in Owensboro, Kentucky. Joseph "Joey" Wesley Manier, a 46-year-old tree trimming contractor, was working near the Stonegate neighborhood. He had spent years in the business, known for his hard work and reliability. Joey's friendly, down-to-earth personality made him well respected in the community. That evening, he was trimming trees outside a home across from the well-known Owensboro Christmas lights display, a local holiday tradition that drew thousands of visitors each year. Families would gather to enjoy the festive decorations. But on this night, tragedy struck. At around 5 p.m., while working on a tree, Joey somehow became caught in a set of Christmas lights wrapped around the branches. As he tried to free himself, he lost his balance and fell into a nearby wood chipper. The machine, designed to break down branches and debris, caused severe injuries. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but sadly, Joey did not survive. The Daviess County Sheriff's Office investigated the accident and confirmed that while there was no foul play involved, it was a devastating and traumatic event. Authorities found no evidence of negligence or unsafe working conditions, but the nature of the accident left the community in shock. After the news broke, tributes poured in from friends and family. Joey's longtime friend, Gregory Huntley, shared his grief online. In a heartfelt message, he described Joey as a kind and hardworking man who made a lasting impact on everyone around him. "You left behind a river of tears this morning, and that river will grow into an ocean as more people hear the news," Huntley wrote. "God doesn't make men like you anymore. I'm grateful to have had a friend like you." Joey's death hit especially hard for those who had shared close moments with him. Huntley recalled how they had talked about going on a fishing trip, but work had always gotten in the way. Now, that trip would never happen. He ended his tribute with, "I will see you again someday. Until then, fly high and keep an eye on us." The Owensboro Christmas lights display, which was meant to bring joy to the community, became a scene of sorrow. The organizers posted a message on Facebook advising visitors to be extra cautious if traveling in the area that night. They confirmed the accident had happened nearby and that roads were temporarily blocked for the investigation. While the lights remained on to help emergency crews see the area, visitors were encouraged to return another night. Joey's accident shed light on the risks of working with powerful equipment like wood chippers. Even with safety measures in place, incidents like this still happen. A 2018 study by the National Library of Medicine reported that between 1982 and 2016, there were 113 fatal wood chipper-related accidents in the U.S. Of those, 41 occurred when workers became caught in the machine. machine. Despite regulations and training, these machines remain hazardous. In Joey's case, his entanglement in the holiday lights set off a tragic chain of events that cost him his life. As Joey's family and friends grieved his sudden loss, many were left wondering if anything could have been done differently. Could extra precautions have prevented the accident? Would turning off the machine momentarily have made a difference? These are questions that may never have clear answers. What began as an ordinary workday turned into an unforgettable tragedy. The holiday lights that Joey worked so close to will continue to shine each year, but now they will also stand as a quiet tribute to a man who lost his life too soon. It was October 30th, 2021, at the La Jolla Zip Zoom Zipline on the La Jolla Indian Reservation in Palma Valley, California. Joaquin Romero, a 34-year-old zipline worker, was assisting a customer on the platform, ensuring she was securely attached. It was a routine task for him, but this time, something went wrong. As the woman started moving out of position, Romero quickly reacted, grabbing her harness to steady her. However, his attempt to prevent her from falling caused him to be pulled off the platform. Both were suddenly suspended in the air about 100 feet above the ground. The zip line, stretching over 2,700 feet and capable of reaching speeds up to 55 miles per hour, was meant to provide an exciting experience. But in that moment, it became a terrifying ordeal. Romero realized the weight of both of them could put too much strain on the line. In a split-second decision, he let go of the harness, ensuring the woman's safety, but putting himself in grave danger. Romero fell approximately 70 feet to the ground, suffering severe injuries. Emergency crews from CAL FIRE responded quickly, using a rope system to bring him to safety before airlifting him to Sharp Memorial Hospital. Despite doctors' efforts, his injuries were too severe, and he passed away 2 days later on November 1st, 2021. The woman he had saved was unharmed, though deeply shaken. Romero's selfless act likely prevented her from suffering the same fate. In the days following the accident, La Jolla Zip Zoom Zipline expressed deep sorrow, extending condolences to Romero's family and vowing to cooperate with authorities. They claimed to prioritize safety, but investigations revealed otherwise. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, found that the zip line had failed to meet key safety requirements. The facility lacked basic protective measures such as safety nets, guardrails, and personal fall arrest systems, equipment that could have prevented Romero's fatal fall. OSHA also determined that employees had not been adequately trained in recognizing and handling fall hazards. These safety failures led to citations for 4 serious violations and a potential fine of $25,000. The zip line, a popular attraction since 2015, had drawn countless visitors eager for a high-speed ride over the valley. But Romero's tragic accident raised concerns about the safety of such attractions. Unlike traditional amusement parks, zipline courses, especially those on tribal land, often fall outside strict regulatory oversight. This lack of enforcement left room for serious safety gaps. Romero's passing deeply impacted his community. A GoFundMe campaign was quickly organized to help cover funeral costs and support his child. Donations poured in, surpassing the initial goal by thousands of dollars. His heroic actions did not go unnoticed, and many mourned the loss of a man who risked his own life to save another. While his bravery is remembered, his death also raises serious concerns about workplace safety. Could this tragedy have been avoided if the zipline had proper protective measures? Would better training have made a difference? These questions remain, but what is certain is that Joaquin Romero's sacrifice will not be forgotten. The La Jolla Zip Zoom Zipline remains closed as authorities continue their investigation. Meanwhile, Romero's family and friends are left mourning a man who gave everything to protect others. It was February 17, 2023, when 24-year-old Xian Clear, a mechanic from Balacola, County Loa, lost his life in a tragic accident while working on a farm in New Zealand. He had arrived from Ireland in October 2022, hoping to work, save money, and experience life abroad. Just days before his 25th birthday, his life was cut short, leaving his loved ones devastated. Xian grew up in Balacola, a small town where everyone knew him. He was friendly, outgoing, and always had time for a chat. He played hurling for the Clough Balacola GAA club and was well liked by his community. His father, Tom, was also a well-known figure, having served as vice chairman of the Loa County Board. Xian's sudden passing sent shockwaves through the town. At the time of the accident, Xian was working for Coogan Contracting on a farm near Wakapapa Village, located on New Zealand's North Island. His job involved operating heavy machinery, including a mower that had become stuck in the mud following Cyclone Gabrielle. To retrieve it, a digger was brought in. As the digger's operator attempted to lift the mower, disaster struck. The digger's boom made contact with an overhead power line carrying 33,000 volts of electricity. The current traveled through the machine and into Sion, who had been standing nearby steadying the mower. The shock was fatal. He died instantly, leaving his co-workers in shock. An investigation by WorkSafe New Zealand found that Coogan Contracting had failed to assess the risks posed by the power lines. The company had not identified them as a hazard or taken necessary precautions. They also failed to provide a spotter, someone who would have ensured that workers and machinery stayed a safe distance away. Due to these safety failures, Coogan Contracting was fined $25,000 and ordered to pay $100,000 in reparations. Sion's death deeply affected his family, friends, and the local community. Gordon Pearson, chairman of Clough Balacalla GAA, described him as a kind and hard-working young man. He had a word for everyone, Pearson said. It's just terrible. In the days following the tragedy, tributes poured in. Friends and teammates shared memories of Sion's bright personality and generous spirit. Local GAA clubs, including Ballypicca's GAA, expressed their condolences, offering support to his grieving family. His parents, Tom and Julie, and his sister Ella, were surrounded by an outpouring of sympathy as they tried to process their sudden loss. Sion's body was returned to Ireland, and his hometown came together to support his family. His funeral took place on February 25, 2023, as the community gathered to say their goodbyes. Sion's death raised serious concerns about workplace safety. Many questioned how such a simple mistake could lead to such devastating consequences. Could this have been prevented with better precautions? Unfortunately, similar incidents have occurred. Just 3 months later, in May 2023, another worker, Emmett Holmes O'Connor, suffered severe injuries after coming into contact with a high-voltage power line while working on scaffolding in Waiheke, New Zealand. The electric shock caused burns and fractures, and his fall from the scaffolding left him with critical injuries. The companies involved, Joan Carpenters Limited and Church Bay Services Limited, were fined and ordered to pay reparations. These cases have highlighted the dangers of working near power lines and the importance of following safety regulations. WorkSafe New Zealand, which investigates workplace accidents, has since pushed for stricter safety measures. The investigation into Sion's accident found that Coogan Contracting's failure to assess risks and provide proper supervision was a direct violation of safety laws. As a result, WorkSafe is now calling for companies to conduct thorough risk assessments and provide adequate training to prevent such accidents from happening again. Sion's passing was a heartbreaking loss. His family, friends, and community will always remember the kind, hard-working young man whose life ended far too soon. His story is a reminder of how crucial workplace safety is and why proper precautions should never be overlooked.